These are some names floating around the interwebs that Ole Miss fans should at least keep an eye on.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today on the show, we talk about Tyler Barron, and he's still getting Ole Miss buzz and why he is a name we should watch. The wide receivers are still out there holding an Ole Miss offer. Somebody from Palatine, Illinois, and is class of 2025. They got an offer yesterday. That's the same hometown as Jacob Bostick. We'll talk about that. And there still is the Cormani McClain question hanging out there as well to look at. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. The week of July 4th, July 2nd, we are going to be having a meet and greet in the Jackson area. It could be Madison, could be Flowood. Be on the lookout for a location of time and place. That's still to be determined, but we know it will be on July 2nd. So we'll be on the lookout for something like that. And there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football go to the top. Go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So an interesting situation. We're going to do a whole lot of portal gossip and everything that's going around the interwebs and all of that on today's show. And we're going to start out with Tyler Barron. Tyler Barron is somebody that we heard for multiple weeks leading up to the transfer portal that he was going to get into the portal and he was going to end up back at Ole Miss. Now, some other teams that have defensive line needs has gotten in and made this a little bit murky as well. Right now, it looks to be a 3-team race. More could always get in because there is no timetable yet for a decision, and he does not have to decide until August. I mean, that's the truth is, and this is what drives everybody crazy that just wants this portal window to go on for 2 weeks, end, and all of this to be over so you don't have to worry about who your team is recruiting or anything like that. Tyler Barron has 3 schools right now that's kind of has his interest. He's already taken an official visit to Miami. I think he's already taken an official visit to USC. And of course, at one point he was committed to Ole Miss in the winter. So he knows exactly what Ole Miss has to offer as well. Ole Miss is being in constant contact. They've done an in-home visit. They're actively recruiting this young man. So that is why you shouldn't discount entirely Ole Miss in this process. But you look at On3, I think it was Pete Nakos, said that Tyler Barron spent this past weekend at USC coming off a trip to Miami. Ole Miss has remained in the picture, staying in contact with the former Tennessee and Louisville transfer. Sources indicated the trip to Los Angeles went well. All official visits go well. The Hurricanes are still very much involved. That official visit, I guarantee you, went well as well. No timeline has been set for when Tyler Barron could make a decision. Tyler Barron was at Tennessee last year, had a pretty good year. 28 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. But the thing that everybody needs to keep in mind about the young Barron and why Ole Miss is so interesting in him is I pulled up his PFF numbers and his PFF advanced stats. And this came up and was interesting, at least to me. This is his grades and everything on individual games. Now go down to game 12. That's against the Georgia Bulldogs. And he had an 83.7 defensive grade. His rush defense was 71.5. His tackling was at 77.7. And his pass rush grade was at 83.2. Does everybody remember what the game against Georgia was like a year ago? Ole Miss did not touch Carson Beck in the entirety of that game. They did not touch him. He had completely clean uniform. They probably didn't even have to do laundry after that game because of Carson Beck and the efficiency that he worked with. Ole Miss in this offseason went out and got Princely Amon-Mielen, who had surgery after spring practice. I think the key word here is after. They think he's going to be back in July. They do not think he's going to miss any time, but just in case you need to have a backup plan. You don't want another Zachary Franklin on your hands to where surgery kind of gets botched a little bit and it's a throwaway year. So we will see exactly how it goes. Now, Tyler Barron would fit in as a rush in type player. He would allow you to do some NASCAR packages. We talked yesterday about how they could be more creative with the front seven with the advent of Isaiah Hamilton coming onto the scene. Him and Trey Amos is going to allow the defense to play man coverage, some bump and run. They can get up tight on wide receivers and allow the pass rushers to get creative. And you have enough pass rushers on this team to where you have to account for them. Now, we talked about the secret sauce that Alabama and Georgia and all those teams have been doing over the years, and that is both of their interior defensive linemen requires a double team. You have to block them in a double team because if you don't, they will wreck your game because they are the closest to the ball at the beginning of the snap and they have the quickest line to the quarterback. If the three technique beats a guard right off the snap, that quarterback is likely going down. But if J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan can demand a double team, then all of a sudden you're looking at single blocking on the outside with Princely Amon-Mielen, Jared Ivey. If Tyler Barron decides to end up at Ole Miss, he is somebody that could be benefiting from this front seven and the cornerbacks and the whole 9 yards. This is another pass rusher that you can kind of throw into the fire for what could be one of the better rosters in college football. I tell you, and I've said this multiple times, Ole Miss's roster, it's gorgeous, man. It is super model gorgeous. There's not a hole on this roster. I talked about this transfer portal was about filling roles, not holes. And they're using it essentially to build towards the 2025 class. And we're going to talk about that with the wide receivers. We're going to talk about that about Cormani McClain in the last segment. As Ole Miss realizes that after this year, they're going to have a major loss with personnel grouping. If you just look, Deion Smith looks like he's going to be a one and done. Trey Harris, done. Jordan Watkins, done. Those players, you're going to have to replace all of that. Look at the running back room. It's the same type situation. And because of that, Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels are using these transfer portal windows and all of these abilities to recruit players to kind of stack different years. And I've talked about many times, there are no programs in college football anymore. They don't exist. It's just the 2024 team, the 2025 team, the 2026 team. You even hear coaches refer to that now. Lane Kiffin, in this area of the transfer portal and all of this uncertainty, is trying to make it a little bit more predictive of what he can do. Tyler Barron is another example of Ole Miss going out and getting the most talent they possibly can for a position. And honestly, it's beneficial. Nobody should complain about this because this is always one transfer portal cycle away from basically having your program destroyed. And by program, I mean your team. To where you have all of a sudden multiple years to recover from this one situation. And there's 2 transfer portal periods that you have to get through. It's the reason that the kinder, gentler spring practice is going to happen. You don't want to tick anybody off. You want to make it to where it seems as fun as possible as you can have until the transfer portal ends. And then after the transfer portal, that's when you turn into Nick Saban. The system that college sports have right now requires a head coach to be two-faced. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It requires them to be that way. Because what it's going to take to win over that spring transfer portal window, what it's going to be taken to do that is not what it takes to win all the games. That coach that is the kinder, gentler guy that's having fun and stuff like that, that guy is not going to succeed in the fall. Because in the fall, you do have to do things a certain way. You have to. Whether you're a player's coach or not, there's certain things that have to be demanded. And after the spring transfer portal window, whenever May 1st hit, you saw the transition from good coaches, from that kinder, gentler guy, into the actual football coach that we all know and love. Really interesting stuff about that as well. But Tyler Barron, really good potential pickup. USC, Miami, and Ole Miss appears to be his final three right now. Others could get into it, but there's no timeline yet for a decision. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. 2 wide receivers are currently above the rest in the portal, and we talk about that and what it means. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, you can bet on the Ole Miss win total for 2024 that currently sits at 9.5. You can get that at minus 144, or you can bet on Ole Miss to win the SEC currently, which is sitting at about plus 650. That's like 6.5 to 1, if I'm not mistaken. You can bet on that. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Now, the 2 players, Ole Miss is recruiting 2 wide receivers out of the transfer portal, and it's something that everybody is freaking out about. And I could probably get 17 questions per day about Deion Smith, okay? And they think that these receivers are some kind of a thing about Deion Smith. Ole Miss is not recruiting for 2024 at receiver. That room is in good shape. They fully expect Deion Smith to bake it. Now, all of that. And the wide receiver room is kind of exactly where they want it to be. But why is Ole Miss recruiting these players? Well, you need some upperclassmen in the room for the 2025 wide receivers. You need some guys that do things the right way. And that is the reason Ole Miss is going after these certain wide receivers, whether it be Jacob Bostick or what is his name? Jack Hestera, who had 28 catches, 349 yards, and 3 touchdowns with Charlotte a year ago. I know this is from Colorado. He was on the Colorado team that was told to transfer out at the end of the year because Deion was bringing his own luggage. He's one of that group. But he's being recruited to Ole Miss, and so is Jacob Bostick. And the reason for that is the class of 2025. As it sits right now, the alpha dog in the room is either going to be one of these JUCO wide receivers that, I do not expect Deion Smith to last for more than a year at Ole Miss. And I don't think anything negative. I just think he's going to go pro. This is a Randy Moss level talent kid. Trey Harris, same way. His eligibility is done. Jordan Watkins, Juice Wells. Those 4 are going to move on to greener pastures. So the next group coming up, the alpha dog, is probably what? Caden Lee. The alpha dog is probably what? Aiden Williams. You have Nareel White. You have Jerome Miles that just committed. This is a very, very young room. And you're going to have a quarterback that's either Walker Howard or Austin Simmons. This whole football team is going to look completely different. Not any less necessarily talented, but it's going to look different. So this wide receiver room needed to go get some veterans to pull into their room. Somebody that's in the system, somebody that you can count on doing things the right way. Jack Hestera fits that bill to a T. And then whenever you add Jacob Bostick, it would fit that as well. Jacob Bostick right now got an offer from Texas A&M. The two schools to pay attention to in his recruitment is probably Texas A&M and Ole Miss. Jacob Bostick is a sprinter. He's a runner. He's from Palatine, Illinois. And the reason that you know that Ole Miss is really invested in this player potentially is it could be pure coincidence, but I do not believe in coincidences whenever it comes to recruiting. Ole Miss offered a kid from Palatine in Illinois, a class of 2025. He is 4-star player on Rivals, 4-star on 247, not as highly rated on On3 or ESPN, on ESPN. 6'5", 240 pounds, defensive lineman. He is from the same hometown as Jacob Bostick. So his high school player. Now, I do not know if they're related. I do not know if they're boys. I do not know if Jacob Bostick babysat him. I don't know any of that stuff. All I know is this is a weird situation and a coincidence that probably needs to be paid attention to. That is something that everybody, whenever coincidences like this happen, everybody needs to perk their ears up and try and figure out what the link is and what's going on. Like I said, it could be a pure coincidence they're from there. I don't believe in that, though. Not in recruiting. These guys do different stuff to try and kind of move the line their direction as opposed to the other direction. This could be a situation where the NIL situation between Ole Miss and Texas A&M is pretty close to the same for Jacob Bostick, and this is just a little way to sweeten the deal. Maybe this is like Zedrick Woods for Laramie Tunsil or something like that. So pay attention with Jalen Williams to see exactly how that will go as well. Again, Jack Hestera is out there as well. Ole Miss is recruiting wide receivers. This is an example of what I talked about in the last segment, to where Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin is constantly building up the teams. They use every available aspect of every transfer portal window, every recruiting cycle to try and make their team better and make their teams better, I should say, because the 2024 team is probably pretty well done. But Lane's kind of playing four-dimensional chess right now and trying to work on the 2025 team as well. And I think Jack Hestera would absolutely be somebody that fit the bill. And if they could get Jacob Bostick, that would as well. Big time stuff. And this is another situation of position groups, and everybody gets freaked out because they're watching football and they want it to be like it was in 2008, even though it cannot be like 2008. And you got a situation to where if you're going to get somebody, you're obviously going to replace somebody, because the reality of this situation is right now, there's not even a such thing as the 85 anymore. Used to, the hard and fast rule of intercollegiate athletics was 85 scholarships. Now, in the age of NIL, you can have NIL contracts that pay for the kid's school. He's not a scholarship athlete, but his school's paid for. You could have 100, 105 kids on scholarships as preferred walk-ons getting a full ride through college. And there's not a thing that the NCAA can do about that, because in the age of NIL, you can't stop these kids from earning, and you're not going over 85 scholarships within the school. So it's a way that you can expand the depth on your roster. There is no aren't we done type situation, because it's no guarantee that either one of these players would be going on scholarship traditionally as we think of. Now, I think their school would be completely paid for, but that is something that we need to keep an eye on as well. The 85 rule doesn't exist anymore. And we're almost at the point where eligibility is just a myth as well, because you look on these rosters and you got there and there's like 7th and 8th year seniors. And I don't know how this works. I understand back in the day that the rarity that was a 6th year senior, Does everybody remember the shock of a sixth-year senior? It's like, man, this guy had a bad go of things, and he was able to persevere and make it to a sixth-year senior. Miami has a player on their roster that's a ninth-year senior. The math doesn't work out whenever you do that. It doesn't. So in my opinion, eligibility is a myth. So don't count on the 85. Just because you bring somebody in doesn't mean somebody has to go necessarily, although that is still a lot of the case. And don't just overly count on the fact that eligibility runs out. I'm not 100% sure that if a player that was 35 years old that wanted to play college football, who sued to do it, they wouldn't let him do it. Just kind of is what it is, honestly. So, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. So, Cormani McClain is out there, and my detective work says we might need to pay attention to this. All right, game off. We got to pause right here to talk some more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff on this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends with time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers that you can trade with your friends to complete albums for really big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting your friends whenever you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. There's always a new timed event that will help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or even rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover on Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon's Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. So one thing that we need to talk about, and some gossip that's out there, and they're doing an excellent job of being quiet on this one, by the way. It is really hard to find out any information on Cormani McClain except for this. The former five-star Cormani McClain has been in contact with 9 schools across the Big 12, Big 10, and SEC, according to Pete Nakos. McClain's camp says he'll commit in 1 to 2 weeks. Now, we don't know if a visit's been set up. They're doing a remarkable job of staying quiet, but this is what we do know. And this is why I think that people need to pay attention to him just a little bit. And that is, Jackson Dart follows him. And if Jackson Dart follows you on Instagram, you're worth paying attention to. He's also followed by Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss Recruiting. All of the Ole Miss recruiting accounts follow this athlete. If that happens, my ears perk up about why it's happening and if Ole Miss has a shot. And whenever you look about 9 schools across the Big 12, Big 10, and SEC, that kind of lets you know what's going on. Now, the question becomes why Ole Miss would do that. Ole Miss just brought in Isaiah Hamilton out of Houston. 50 tackles, 4 interceptions, 4 pass breakups. Really good football player, but he's a one and done, okay? This is the key to whenever you're looking at transfer portal recruiting, as it says. He is going to be the number 2 or number 1 cornerback next year for Ole Miss regardless. So nothing that is happening affects Isaiah Hamilton, in my opinion. But Cormani McClain has 3 years of eligibility. 4 years to play 3, to be exact. He started several games towards the end of the year for Colorado a year ago. And Ole Miss will be losing after this year Trey Amos and Isaiah Hamilton. So the cornerback room will be a desperation type room to move to get people in. This eligibility would fill the role that a Morium Walker left. You want to talk about a person leaving and another person coming in, it would be a 1-for-1 type situation. Even a long cornerback and things like that, somebody should pay attention to. And whenever you look at who almost got committed from from Tupelo the other day, you can see the big 6'4" cornerback and all that. I think his name was Dunn. So it's an interesting situation. And Cormani McClain, like I said, if he's got 9 suitors, he's got 9 suitors. But I do know that Ole Miss is following this player. I don't know if they're tracking. I don't know if they're trying to set up a visit. The people that normally talk in this situation are people around the players. The schools don't talk, by the way. They're not throwing out information. The schools are letting everybody run wild with what everybody else is saying. That's one of the reasons the NIL money is always elevated. Like people say, if you hear an amount on NIL, cut it in half automatically. The reason is the people that are talking about the amount is the people that are getting offered the money, and they're trying to set that up to publicly get a better offer down the road. That's the way that works. Cormani McClain's a really good player. If you look at him over the course of the end of the year, he did not have a good game in the 12th game of the year against Washington State. Played fairly well against Utah, and against Oregon State and Arizona, he was actually pretty good, honestly. But when you look at several good teams, because all of those were pretty good teams a year ago, he really only suffered against Washington State, and that was a run and shoot type deal. A true freshman against a run and shoot offense is always going to be problematic because of the number of option routes that they run. There's a situation that cornerbacks can't really be right. So if you're a young quarterback and don't know how to do that, if you're somebody that is overly aggressive and willing to bite, it's a situation where those option routes can go kind of sideways on you. He is a really good cornerback. I think he would fit Ole Miss's defense next year very well. I could see a situation where Chris Graves or Cedric Beavers and Cormani McClain are patrolling on the secondary next season. Interesting type stuff. He's a good football player, but he has 9 players in the SEC, Big 10 and Big 12, probably bigger schools after this player, because he is a 6'2", 170-pound-ish cornerback. He's long. He has that one thing that everybody wants on their defense, and he has all of the athleticism and the bend. And he's from right up the road in Lakeland, Florida. Former Lakeland Dreadnought, one of the best nicknames in all of high school football. Really good football player. But Ole Miss is, I think, at least going to kick the tires to see if they can get in. I think Ole Miss is likely one of the 9 schools that were mentioned in the Pete Nakos tweet. Really, really interesting stuff, and I'm pretty fired up about where Ole Miss sits defensively. Remember, when it comes to the transfer portal, you never stop adding, ever. You never say we're good enough, because if that happens, the next transfer portal cycle, it's going to turn on you, and all of a sudden you're going to be problematic. You need more than enough players. When you look at what Ole Miss did a year ago with the quarterback room with Spencer Sanders and Walker Howard and all of that, the same thing is happening at multiple positions this year. Ole Miss has kind of figured out the way that they need to handle this. And because of that, everybody else is just trying to survive. They're kind of figuring out how to thrive. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there, and thank you for that. This week we have Zach Berry from the Ole Miss Spirit and John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.